Hello Sunshine, this is Joy from Michigan in the US, and I am going to do a little bit of Art 1 tonight. So, let me get situated here. I apologize, my chair is kind of creaky, but we'll work with it. Okay, so in one of our previous assignments, we painted a cone flower, a purple cone flower based on this kind of, and it was a bit of a challenge to get the shape of everything right. So I just want to, based on this painting, do a pencil drawing of the same basic thing. So all you need for this assignment is paper, an eraser, and some pencils. And this is, you can get as detailed as you want on this, but I'm going to start with just a basic pencil because it's more about the shape of the petals than it is about the finished product. So I'm going to try to do a little bit of a bigger flower. This was half a sheet, so I'm going to try to fill the page a little more. So when you're setting the center of interest on your page, you don't ever want it to be dead center because the eye doesn't have anywhere to travel from there. It just kind of lands there and stops. So I'm going to move up to about the top third. And I'm going to start with the center of the flower. So, and hopefully you guys can see this. I was hoping with my light here, I'll try to draw darker than I normally would. I'm just going to, I'm pushing pretty hard, so I'm going to pull this paper right out of my notebook so that it doesn't leave lines on the next page. So the cone part is pretty rounded on the top. This I would like to come out a little bit further. So I would just be normally sketching this very lightly, but I want to make sure you guys can see it. So it's a little bit darker than what I would typically do for my own drawing. So I want rounded edges, and then the bottom is like a soft smile. So it's kind of rounded. So there, or you know, it almost looks to me like an egg yolk. From the right angle, I guess. So then I'm just going to start by drawing in lines of where I want the petals to come from. It's going to look kind of like a spider, guys. Now, before I go too much further, I want that stem in here. So we're going to take the stem from about the middle of the flower and lightly, I'm doing it darkly, deep pressure here, but you guys do it light, kind of curved. Again, it'll pull the eye through the drawing. So once I have just the basic beginning, looks like a spider on a stick, then I'm going to start looking at adding details. So when I'm drawing, just 1 second, sorry. Okay. When I'm drawing, I really pay attention to the relationship from one line to the next. So when I'm looking at this petal here, this relationship is, we're kind of straight here and then angled. It makes it easier to copy a line. So normally I'd be looking at a photograph. I don't have one handy, so. And of course, if your pencil leaves a mark, you know, it's really easy to just go with that and kind of make it part of the flower. So let's give this one kind of a connection. So now we have a place where it's connected to this cone. And then it's gonna kind of turn, okay? And again, sketch this really lightly so that you can adjust these as needed. And then for this petal, it's gonna be wider at the base and then really narrow. Sorry guys, had an alarm go off. Okay, let's make that a little bit. So you're just gonna keep changing the shape, changing the relationship between one line and the next. So, and I would start with the petals that are gonna be on top. So there's gonna be petals underneath, but let's just get some of these top petals in. This one I think is growing at an angle. So we'll just add that. And it's okay if some petals are longer than others. You don't want it to be drastically different, but they're not always the same either. So and turn your paper so that it's easiest for you to handle. Let's add one here. These can be kind of hard to add in when they're right at the center of the flower because the angle is so different. And then I'm going to erase that stem line because I don't want that in the petal. And of course you will not have pushed as hard as I did, so you won't have the trace of it left there. Now clearly this is a big gap, so let's start by adding some petals in there. So I'm just going to come from underneath this petal, and then you know what, this one's going to grow from right there. And you want your petals to all be similar, so these kind of get bigger, they kind of have a bulge here, and then they get pointy at the end. Otherwise they look like they don't belong on the same flower. So then we're going to come here. Let's see, this one's going to go to there. And you gotta kind of just put your pencil in a very different, in a variety of places and see how wide does that petal need to be. And if you can't tell, flip your paper upside down and work from the tip up, because sometimes that's easier. And then you get the right shape that way. All right. I think we need a skinny little petal in here. I kind of like working upside down, so I'm going to keep doing that. And you definitely want a huge variety in the petals. You don't want them all the same. And if you look at a flower, they are very similar, but they're not the same. So that's important to keep in mind. I'm not looking for something. This is sort of a based in reality, but a little more fanciful. I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm not looking for completely realistic here. I'm just looking for an identifiable shape. Somebody can look at this and go, oh, that's a flower. So that's the main part that I'm looking for. And then just make it fun. Add your own little personality to your flower. This petal is far too short. So I'm just gonna add kind of a curvy end on that. And again, I would normally do this really, really lightly so I can go back and erase my lines and fix them as needed. Yeah, see, that's got to come over here now. That's better. All right, so we've got a very basic flower. I'm going to add another line. I would have normally have started this stem off center. Because I've pushed so hard, I'm just going to make this work. But if you start it a little bit off center on one side or the other, then you just have to add one line instead of adding one on each side of this. But I'm just going to make this look right. So we're going to go. This part's kind of hard because you want the width of your stem to be the same or thicker at the top and thinner at the bottom, but not by much. So if I go like this, that doesn't look right. So we want to make sure that when we add this line in, and again, it might be easier to turn your paper one way or the other. And so again, when I'm drawing this stem, I'm looking at the relationship between the existing line that's there and the line that I'm adding. And I'm trying to keep this space between line, we'll call this line A, and this is line B. You want this space to remain even. So if you kind of do it that way, it's a little bit easier, and you can stop and start. It doesn't have to all be one fluid movement. Move your paper. Oh, I got a little bit big there. If you make a mistake, just go back. Again, this should be light sketching, not the way I'm doing it. All right, I'm gonna erase my little A and B there, which you guys probably couldn't see real well because it's pretty small, but. All right, so now we have the basic shape. And I think sometimes it's easier to do a drawing like this rather than doing a whole page of drawing just petals. It's easier to put it into a flower. So this looks a little bit bland. It also, if I were going to crop this, if I was going to cut it down, I would probably go to there and maybe there. So I've got almost too much white space. That can always be fixed by just cutting your paper down just a little bit. All right, so that's a pretty good start. I feel like we need one more petal that's coming out and then going straight down. And then we'll just add that little tip there. There. And maybe there's like a little bit of a gap there. All right. So now we're going to talk about adding a little bit of dimension to this. So you're going to find your petals that are on top and then go to the next petal. So that would be this one. I'm going to switch pencils out here to a 4B. It's a little bit easier to shade with. You don't have to use much pressure. So we're just going to come in and we're going to add that little bit of shading. And I do hold my pencil different ways depending on what I'm trying to add. When I get to the center, sometimes I'll just fill that in with black, really give it some detail, definition. All right, and then we're just gonna, as we get out farther and farther, a lighter and lighter touch. And then you can also go over the edges of your petals here and just kind of darken those up. If I were going to just do this however I wanted, I would probably add some colored pencils to this, but we're just going to work with regular pencils, no colored pencils this time. Now when you get towards the cone of the flower, you are going to have a little bit of a shading there, and you can do these little short lines and pull them out, and they don't have to be all, you can leave white spaces in there or lighter spaces, and then just kind of slowly lighten it up. I'm going to put a highlight over here, so I'm going to intentionally try not to touch that with my pencil, and then we're going to darken it here so that it gives it just a little bit more dimension. So one of the things you can do, and I will just, this isn't going to work the best because this is not the tool, but you can get these paper blenders, blending tools, or you can kind of squish up a piece of paper. Where's my, there we go. So you have this little, and then you can go in and just kind of rub it around and it will blend the pencil. This one's not working real great because it's too big, but if you buy the actual blender, it works really well. You can also just go in with your finger and kind of smudge it a bit. If you get to the point where it's like, oh, I lost the light spot, you can go back in with your eraser and lighten that up. And then go back in with your finger and smooth it out if you need to. So those are the blending tips I'm going to give you today. And I want you to just keep going around this flower, add some shading, give some separation to those petals. So because I have a highlight on this petal here, I'm just going to thicken up that line so hopefully you can see. So there's a highlight here, so I can add shading here and it will provide separation between this petal and this petal. So, and remember, you always want to choose before you start drawing where your light's coming from. This is my light. So it's coming down this way. So my highlights are going to be here. My shadow, deepest shadows are going to be here. So just make sure you think those things through. All right, this one's way underneath everything, so it needs to be pretty dark. And then if you want to go even further, you can shade the opposite way that you originally started, and it will really deepen that up. And then I'm just going to add some nice dark edging on my petal there. So now that petal is clearly behind everything else. Same thing with this little tip here from this petal. Sometimes the lead will break off little pieces and you just blow those off. All right, so that part is gonna be really dark. And then up here, it's the light's hitting it. So it's really not gonna be dark. Now here we'll have a little bit of shading there and maybe just a tiny bit there. But really this petal is gonna be the lightest one in the bunch because the light's gonna hit that. And I feel like I've done a little bit too much, so I'm just gonna go in and real lightly with my eraser, just lighten that up, just a pinch. Same thing with this petal, it's gonna have a lot of light on it, so I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna add a little bit of shading. I feel like this needs more definition on this petal underneath, because you do want the definition of the shape, so. All right, so normally I would have, sorry, I'm thinking. I would have used a lighter touch with my sketch, and when I go over with this pencil, it would cover all that up. So it's not quite covering it like it normally would, but that's okay. So I'm just adding some texture here, and then I'm gonna go back in. Oh my goodness, look what I did. This is what happens when you paint and draw in the same space. I was trying to save those little paint drips for stuff, but that's okay. All right. So if you see little bits of blue on here, you'll know why. So I just want to make sure that this is nice and light. All right. So keep doing that as you go around, decide which petals are underneath, give them some shading, give some shading at the base of the flower, and then kind of work your way out. And then on this one, I want it to look almost like it's curling under. So it's gonna be a little bit darker on the tip there. And let's see, this one, we'll add some basic. This one's gonna look a little funky, this particular petal, because I had so many lines underneath it that I erased. So just enjoy the process. Add your own little touch, your own take on it. Let's blend that a little bit. And the harder you push with your fingers, the more it will look blended. All right, I'm just gonna keep working on this and stop talking, and I'll speed this up so it won't be at the regular speed. All right, I'm just about done with these petals. I do think we need a little bit more there. Just really give that a little more dimension. And then we're gonna go into the cone part of the flower, and we're gonna do the same thing. So we know the light's coming from over there. So I'm just gonna scribble it in. just scribble in kind of where I think the shadow would fall. And if you do like little circles, it'll give it kind of that, the look of the center of a flower. All right, I'm going to move to my, this is just a regular B pencil. So it allows me to do a lighter, and I'm so bad about that. Try not to drag your hand on your paper, or put a piece of paper towel underneath, or something, anything underneath your hand. So the highlight's gonna be here. I can always go back and lighten that up a little bit too if I want. So my shading, I'm using different pencils so I can get different depth. And lighter touch as you go up so that it gives it, you want the deepest, darkest part to be down here. And then get lighter and lighter as you go up. So you gotta use a really light touch as you move upwards. All right, that's it for the 5B. Now I'm going to erase this line, and I'll go back and fix this over here because I should have done this before, which is why I always have you watch my videos all the way through before you start drawing. So you don't really want a hard line right there where there's going to be a highlight. Instead, I will take my lightest pencil, which is a 4H, and just really, really light touch here. Just add that same shape that I was doing with the other parts, and let that be what gives the edge its edge. And then this is a little bit dark, so I'm just going to go in and just real lightly pull some of that off. Not all of it, just a little. All right, so now we're looking more like a 3D flower. I'm sorry, there's stuff all over my floor and I'm stepping on it. This is what I get for not cleaning up my art room first. So I bring that up. So we're getting a much nicer 3D look there. So the stem, I think, is the easiest part. I'm gonna go back to a darker, I have a 4B. Again, the light's coming from here. Now there's not gonna be much light here because the flower is gonna block it because it's coming from above. So that part we can put in pretty dark. And then we're just gonna follow it down. And with the stem, I just like to do some pretty deep lines, but short, so that it gives it more of a texture. I'm just gonna follow that line all the way up, make that a little bit more pronounced, I guess. Went out too far a little bit there, no big deal. Go back in with your eraser and take that right off. All right, so I thought that was an eraser bit. It's not, it's a little pencil line. So that's all I do for the stem. You can always go back in with your eraser and just kind of add little lighter spots, or even use your eraser. If you pull your eraser across it really, really lightly, it can also do some blending for you. So, not my favorite tool for blending, but it works in a pinch. So one last thing to add, and that is a leaf. And I'm actually gonna do, so this one I did a heart-shaped leaf, but this one I'm gonna do an iris type leaf. I should look these up to find out what kind of leaf they have, but so from right here at the base, we're just going to add one leaf. Okay. And it's gonna curl. All right, and I'm actually gonna kind of pull it back around maybe. I've never done a leaf like this before with this type of flower, so this may have been a mistake, but this part will have a little bit of highlight, but again, you're gonna get some shadow from the flower, so it's not going to have this kind of a highlight. It's going to be a little bit darker than that. So I'm just going to start adding some shading, especially on this edge. Just take that all the way down. Yeah, I can tell already I don't like this. All right, I'm changing my mind. We're gonna stick with the heart-shaped. And mine will not erase as well as yours. Now, if you feel like trying to make a go of that kind of a leaf, go for it. But I think the heart-shape's gonna look more complementary to the flower. So, no big deal. This is the beauty of using pencil instead of paint. You just go in and take it right back off. I'm sorry, my camera, I'm sure, is shaking. Okay. So the leaf, let's make this one here. I'm tracing, or I'm drawing very lightly, so I'm sorry, you guys probably can't see much. So just kind of a heart-shaped leaf. And then let's add the stem. And I did that fairly thin, but you can go back and thicken that up. Now, first thing I'm going to do is add my veins, because they kind of help with the shading. Now when I add my veins, I try really, really hard not to have them start from the same point. So this one's a little bit further back, this one's in between these two. I don't want them to look too uniform. And you don't have to do a lot of this, just enough to say, hey, this is a leaf. Okay. So on a leaf, it's going to be a little bit different. Okay, sorry, I had a text coming through. So you are going to have a little more shading near the vein, because a lot of times the leaf will kind of fold in like this. So it's not flat like this, it's kind of cupped. So I added some shading down in the middle of the leaf, and then as you come out, you're going to get lighter and lighter. Now, because of where the light's coming from, we're going to have more deep colors here, or heavier shading here, than we will here. It's not quite an exact science because the flower is above it. So we're just going to go in, and I try really hard. So sometimes I'll go in and make these lines really dark, just so they still stand out after I shade. So if you start shading and you're like, oh, I'm losing that line, make sure you're not shading too heavily, but then go back in and just darken those up, and it'll really make them pop. And I'm just going to add some shading here to the edge of the leaf to give it a look of depth. And I'm intentionally making the line fairly crooked, almost like a zigzag on a sewing machine, just because that's just the kind of leaf I felt like drawing today. Had that little curl, not very realistic, but a little bit fun. So, and again, keep moving your paper so it's easiest for you. You can also put one hand over what you've already finished and use that to rest your drawing hand on. And I'm intentionally making this section pretty heavy-handed because it's going to be in a deeper shaded spot than the rest of it. All right, so we're going to start at the center. And try holding your pencil different ways to see what different effects you can get. I like holding it like this because I can get a large portion of the leaf covered in a very quick amount of time. So, and then I can go back and add a little more detailed shading. I'm losing my lines here, so I'm just gonna thicken those up. And it's okay if you can't see every last detail of those lines. That's not a big deal. You just want enough there that they know, oh, that's the vein in the leaf. All right. A little more pressure for a deeper shade. So I'm pushing pretty hard right now. And now I'm just gonna let up. Again, pushing hard and letting up. All right. And if you look at a leaf in nature, it's not all the same shade of green. So add some little sections that are lighter and darker, and make sure that your whole leaf is intentionally unevenly shaded. I think it adds to the realistic look of it. And then I'm just gonna go in and blend with my little bit of paper here. I'm not gonna go over the lines, the little veins, because that'll blur them. And I don't want that, but I do want this leaf to be a little more blended. And I am losing some of my highlights here, but I'm not gonna worry about it because I can go back with my eraser and put those right back in. All right, so clearly not enough highlights, not a big deal. I'm gonna go in and just add those with the eraser. Take your time. And then right next to this shadow, I'd like to add a little highlight if I can, although my eraser's just picking up a lot of that. All right. All right, guys. I'm going to take my H pencil and just real lightly kind of just add a little more texture to those areas that I just added the highlight, just because I don't want them to be too purposeful looking, I guess. I want them to blend a little better. All right, and so that's that. That's drawing the flower and adding some shading, and hopefully you can create one that you really like. I will show you the drawing up close. So there is, I'm really happy with the flower. I feel like that came out really well. You know what, let me do this a little bit differently. I'm really happy with that. That was a lot of fun. I think it came out pretty well. The leaf is a little bit dark, I think, but overall, I feel like it works. So there you guys go. A little set of pencils, a little eraser, a little time, and this is the end result. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you try this and how yours turns out. For my niece, I'll see yours soon. And I will see you guys on the next video. Thanks so much.